Hello cave dwellers, welcome to the cave. We're talking 3D printers today, specifically this new one that I've got in the box here. I've never owned one before, you may be surprised to hear, because until now, whenever I've needed a 3D printed part, generally I've found that somebody's making it, somebody's selling it on eBay, albeit at a premium, things like the BBC Micro User ROM port cover. You're paying above the odds for what that is, but you're paying for the convenience of not having to have your own printer. Well, I've decided to change all that. It's come about because of the PC Engine Trash to Treasure that we're doing at the moment. I mentioned that I might do a destructive modification, and there was a little bit of an outcry in the comment section, and I have to say I agree. I'm all for non-destructive modification where possible, and it's the straw that really broke the 3D camel's back for me. It made me go out and purchase this. This is an Ender 3 Pro. At the moment, that's all I can tell you about it. I am a complete novice to owning and operating a 3D printer. So today's episode, it's not really a review, it's a first impressions, and it's sharing with you my experience as a complete newcomer to 3D printing, what that experience is like, what any of the problems are that I come across that you may have to tackle too, and also a little look at what this specific printer, the Ender 3 Pro, is all about, assuming we can build it and get it working. I've also called upon the experience of Howard from Dubious Engineering, who is a longer term 3D printer owner, so he can share with us some of his longer term experience to tell us what we can expect in the future. But first of all, let's get a knife, let's get this open, and let's see if we can build this thing and 3D print something.
This episode is supported by MonsterJoysticks.com. Level up your Raspberry Pi with our all-in-one arcade kit using genuine Sanwa arcade parts. And OneClickPrint.com for your photos on canvas, acrylic, gifts and more. Local craftsmen and global delivery.
No messing about then, let's dive straight in, unbox and build our printer. I'm really quite excited to get this thing working. I wasn't quite sure how much self-assembly would be needed to get it up and running, and it turns out it's quite a bit. You'll need a clear afternoon and some patience to make sure you do it properly, and the manual guides you through it. Kind of. On the face of it, it's 12 nicely illustrated steps over just 1.5 pages per language, but a lot of helpful information is omitted in the quest for pretty pictures. And Creality do have their own video guide to building it, but that video guide doesn't follow the steps in the manual. It's two completely different approaches. So I've decided today to document each step as it's shown in the manual, so perhaps you can use my video and the manual to guide you through it. So to build it, we need to take everything out the box and lay it out. There's actually 2 layers to the box. And in the second layer, we've got a handy toolkit, including scraper, spanners and Allen keys. You don't need a single tool of your own to build this, which is nice. Everything is included, and all the screws are all labelled, which is very handy. But nothing else is labelled, so we do need to learn some terminology as we put it together to understand what each piece is. So let's visit each of those 12 steps to build our Ender 3 Pro. Step 1. First up, we need the M5x45 screws and the 2 biggest posts or profiles, and these are not identical. Check for holes on the posts. The one with 2 holes down the length of it is what the power supply unit will attach to. Those 2 holes are not central, so they should be installed nearest to the base, as should the 2 holes on the other post. So it looks like this. Step 2. Now we mount the display and the PSU, and we'll want the M5x8 and M4x20 screws to get these mounted. And as you're doing this, do double check the voltage on the PSU is set correctly for your region to avoid a big puff of magic smoke. We then line the PSU up with the post and screw it in, and yes, I have substituted the included tools for my own here. It was just easier for some parts of the build. That looks to be in nice and securely. Onto the display then, and that's just 2 screws which go straight into the base of the printer here. Nice and simple. Even I can do it. Step 3. This little micro switch here is the Z-axis limit switch. If it's touched, then our print assembly has hit the bottom of its allowed travel. And so this is mounted at the base of the post. Slide it on, and then loosen the screw slightly to let the nuts behind fall 90 degrees, and then tighten it again. Do this on both screws and you'll find that it's installed nice and securely. Step 4. And then we install the Z-axis motor. The Z-axis being the vertical movement of the print assembly, and this is a little fiddly to get the screws in here. One on either side of the coupling for the screw rod, which comes next. And there is the screw rod still in its transit sheath at this stage. We will take that off later. And with the screw rod in the coupler, calm yourselves, you can tighten the top screw to secure it in place. Step 5. So that's our vertical or Z-axis. Now for the X-axis, the horizontal crossbar on which the extruder lives. There are 2 crossbars. Again, notice the difference in the holes. We want the one with 6 holes at this point. First we mount this part. It houses the X-axis microswitch and motor. And to mount it, look for this screw here with the 2 holes above it. We want to pair that up with the largest hole on the crossbar, and that will then help us to align the screw holes. And those screws go in here from the inside out, which might feel a bit counterintuitive as there are holes on the other side, but they don't go there, they go from the inside out like this. How do I know? Well, I think you can probably guess. Step 6. Building the X assembly continues as we add the extruder, which is tethered to the base unit, and it slides onto our assembly like so. Ooh, look at the smooth action on that. On the end goes this piece. Again, it has wheels on which to allow the X assembly to travel up and down the posts as driven by the motor on the other end. And again, we marry this screw up here with the largest hole on the crossbar and then screw it into place. These are the little details that are missing from the official build guide, so hopefully you find these little tips useful. Step 7. Our extruder isn't going to move itself along the X-axis, so we need to first fit this wheel on one end, around which the drive belt will wrap. And, as with before, it's a case of sliding it into place, loosening the screws so that the nuts spin behind it, and tightening it to secure it into place. You want everything in securely, but there's no need to over-tighten. You don't know when you might need to return to perform some maintenance further down the line, and you don't want to screw things in so tightly that you start buckling some of the crossbars or the posts. Step 8. Now our drive belt goes on for the X-axis. There's the cog that drives it in there, so we feed the belt through over that cog, teeth down obviously so that it can engage the cog, and feed it along the length of the bar, around the wheel that we fitted at the other end, and then on the underside we just slot in to each end of the extruder assembly. Once it's in, check the belt hasn't twisted and is moving freely, and then our assembly is ready. Step 9. Right, let's take the sheath off the rod, I don't know why we left it on there for so long, and get the X assembly into the posts. We just tease the wheels onto the post at each side, it shouldn't need to be forced, and then the screw rod screws into place here. And once in, the whole assembly should move up and down evenly on both sides as you manually spin that rod. Step 10. We're nearly there now, time to fit the crossbar to the top of the unit. The larger holes face up to allow the screw heads to be sunk into them, 2 go in either side, and again, don't over tighten them. And finally, we just push the end caps on, or give them a tap with a screwdriver if they're being a bit stubborn, and I dare say we could probably 3D print our own if they get lost. Step 11. We'll need somewhere to hang our reel of filament, and that's what this step is for. Put together these parts with the M5x8 screws and the M5 T-nuts. First putting the T-nuts on and then lining them up to slot them on the crossbar, and you know the process by now. Loosen and then tighten so that those nuts fall into place, and that sits on there nicely and securely. Step 12, the final step. Now we connect it all up. I did miss one thing in step 5, which I'll do here because it was so easily missed on the manual, and that's to screw on the gold coloured nozzle and push the guide tube into place here. And connect up all of the motors. Now this part is quite well shown on the manual, so I won't dwell on it for too long. Just make sure that every cable which is labelled with a letter is plugged into the correct port. The display cable goes into port 3 here, and everything just clicks into place. Triple check it all, and with that, we are ready to try out our printer. So we now have something that resembles a 3D printer. What do we do next? Well, looking at the manual, the paper manual that is, it doesn't go any further than the build process. And supposedly, on the USB stick and memory card, there's a little adapter there for a micro SD card. Supposedly on this, there should be the manual as well as a build video, much like the one I've made. But when I looked at my stick, I just had this. Yes, the files were corrupt for me, but I did manage to track down what should be on here from the Creality website. That includes a user manual, albeit a very limited one. There's a few troubleshooting steps. It tells you how to use the home feature to calibrate it, and also how to level the bed, which is a very important thing. So we'll be doing that next to make sure that bed's completely level and ready to print. And then we'll use the recommended software in the manual, which is Cura, a very popular piece of software in the 3D printing world. And I think that's a good one for us to go for because it has a built-in profile from the installation for this specific printer. So it should be plug and play after having built it. I know that's very far from plug and play, build and plug and play. And we can fire off our first 3D print and see if it works for us. So let's get Cura installed and let's get this calibrated. And so this part, I'm assured by more experienced users, gets easier the more you do it. To make sure our printer bed is level, we first navigate the menu to prepare, and then we select Auto Home. And that will send all of the axes to the home position. And while this is going on, it's worth checking the cables to make sure they aren't snagging on anything, and to also get an idea of the range of movement they need before you get down to cable tying them to tidy them up. The vertical or Z-axis motion isn't the quickest, but it really doesn't need to be. When this thing gets going, it does move plenty quick enough. With the axes homed, we then go to Prepare in our menu and disable stepper motors. This allows us to move the axes around manually without resistance from the motors. And so the objective here is to get the bed level in all four corners. And to do this, we use a sheet of paper, slide it under the extruder nozzle in each corner of the bed, and dial the bed up or down until it's just very, very gently dragging on the paper, but not pinning it down. You should feel a light scratch when you pull the paper away. In theory, if you do this in each corner, then you have a level bed. In practice, well, you'll have to wait and see, won't you? Over on our PC, Cura can be downloaded from ultimaker.com, and it's a free and simple thing to install. Cura is a slicer. It will take a 3D model and convert it into a format that the printer understands to build the model in slices. And that file can also contain settings for the extruder and the bed temperature, as well as many other variables. What it isn't is a 3D modeler. To create a model, you need to use one of many available CAD packages out there, and then bring that model into Cura. That's way beyond the scope of our video today, so I've opted to download a model from the Thingiverse website, and in Cura I did scale it down. There are options for scale in there. I really didn't want a 2-foot owl, just a desk-sized pet. I then saved it to the micro SD card, and we're ready to use Broganet to walk it over to the printer. Filament type is another world to be explored in a later episode as I become more familiar with the process, but I'm using PLA as a starter here. Snip it at a 45-degree angle to help feed it in with the handily included side cutters, and then we feed it in here like so. Feed the filament in until it goes no further as it has reached the extruder nozzle, and you can do this step before or after feeding it in. We go to the menu, we go into prepare, and we choose preheat PLA. This will warm the extruder to about 180 degrees and warm the bed, and then as you feed in some more filament, it will come out of the nozzle, and then we know we're ready to print. Don't worry too much if there's a little excess on the nozzle, you'll see why shortly. In then goes our SD card. I'm excited, we're nearly ready to print. We select the print on the menu, and there it is, our first print is underway. And you can see that it sends a little line of filament down one side of the bed to begin, so that does deal with any excess on the extruder. And away it goes in the middle of the bed, making our print. All good, right? Well, I may be new to this, but I'm pretty sure my print isn't supposed to move about on the bed like that. So I cancelled the print and checked how level the bed was once again. I'd clearly gotten something wrong here. And, well, that's what happens when you don't have the bed set right. So after levelling again, things I'm glad to say were much better and our print got underway. I did share my failed print on Twitter and was quickly swamped with advice on what I'd done wrong, what I should coat the bed with, from hairspray to different tapes and glues, and it was all very welcome. There's clearly a very active and passionate 3D printing community willing to help out, so thank you to everyone who did, and there's clearly a lot more to explore in terms of bed types, tips, tricks, even custom parts that you can 3D print yourself to spec out this 3D printer, but all of it way beyond the scope of this introductory video, I think. Slowly and surely, the 3D printer created our owl. It took about 2 hours to print this, and the owl is a favourite creature of Miss RMC, so perhaps this gift will help when I tell her how much I spent on the printer. And there it is, all finished. What a hoot. And there he is, our little owl. I'm really quite happy with him. When you look closely, yes, you can see the slices of the 3D printer, as you can with all 3D prints, but it's very fine. The resolution is more than enough for the kind of things that I want to produce. I'm talking about replacement port covers, replacement trapdoor covers, let's say replacement floppy drive buttons, you know, things like that, very simple shapes to finish off the projects that I'm working on, including that PC Engine project. So if it can do an owl, it can easily do the kinds of things that I want. And I was really pleased with that print. Even if our first print was less than successful, it was all part of the learning process, and it taught us about the importance of leveling the bed. Hopefully today's video has helped you to build this if you've bought one yourself, or it's given you the confidence of buying one if you've been sat on the fence for as long as I did when it came to 3D printing. It's really not that difficult. Couple of hours, you'll have it built and you'll be producing your first 3D prints, and then you can get onto the job, if you should want to, of learning those CAD packages. Now, I'm a great believer in drawing on people who are more experienced than I am in these things. When it comes to 3D printing, there's a lot of people, but one man stands out for me. That's Howard from Dubious Engineering. He's 3D printed things for me before. He is an engineer by trade, so he's very handy with the CAD packages, and he's designed lots of his own objects, which he's printed with his 3D printer to make his life easier. So to see us out today, he's going to share with us some of his tips, share his experience, and show some of those objects that he's created over on his channel, which you should definitely subscribe to, Dubious Engineering. Go and give him a sub, and enjoy the tips that he has for us. One day, I will come back and revisit this and let you know how my progress is going, and just share with you maybe some tips of my own, which I'll note down as I come across problems and overcome them in 3D printing. But for now, I need to get on with that PC Engine project, which I hope to see you in next week. As always, take care, thank you for watching, and here's Howard to see us out.
After 2 years of owning a 3D printer, I can happily tell you that I now get some very good quality prints and some fantastic solutions out of my 3D printer. Took me a little while to iron out all of the bugs and go through the learning experience. I wanted to create my own objects and design and make my own mad things, like this little light here, which my wife uses very regularly most evenings. I've also been coming up with some interesting designs that offer a little bit more structure. This is a guitar holder. So you drop the neck of the guitar into this device, and this device is bolted to the wall. Absolutely solid. Printers can be a little bit noisy, and this here was a 10-hour print. In order to design things like this, clearly you need to learn a little bit of CAD software. I started with FreeCAD, and I found that FreeCAD actually was quite hard to drive, very manual, and lots of menus and little quirks. Then I moved on to Fusion 360, and I found Fusion 360 was a little bit more intuitive, and I was able to put designs together quite quickly and easily using Fusion 360. And then more recently, I found this software, and this software is called a Shaper 3D. And as you can see, I'm actually starting to put together my own little turbine engine in here. So this is going to be good fun. Top tips for 3D printing. Read your printer's instructions. There are lots of parts to your 3D printer, and it might require a little bit of self-assembly work, normally fitting the build bed and aligning the build bed and that kind of stuff. Again, it's really not hard to do, but genuinely suggest reading your instruction manual. Learn with plastic PLA filament first, and then perhaps move on to ABS at some point in the future if you decide you really need to. Personally, I've just stuck with PLA. I find that it's more than adequate for the jobs that I need it to do. The only thing I will say about PLA is if you leave it outside in the hot sunshine, or if it gets hot in a car, it has a tendency to warp a little bit, so it might change shape ever so slightly. You don't need to worry too much about print settings like speeds and feeds and things like that, because Cura print software actually sets a lot of that up for you, assuming your printer is on the Cura list. So as a recommendation, perhaps download the Cura software and check that the printer that you're thinking of buying exists on that list. Get a printer with a heated build bed to ensure good part adhesion. My suggestion is to put down a piece of glass on that build bed. Borosilicate glass will make sure that everything is super flat, because sometimes the aluminium build beds that come out with these printers do have a little bit of undulation in them. And then on top of that flat glass build plate, I recommend putting a flexible plastic micro adhesive surface. That effectively acts like a sticky bed, but you don't have to put any glue on it, so you're not spraying it with hairspray and then cleaning it again later down the line and all of that kind of good stuff. These new build plates are absolutely fabulous. They just have a textured surface, and what happens is the PLA, when it goes down on the build bed, it sort of sticks to that textured surface, and then when you're finished you can literally just peel your parts off of that textured surface. Key thing, don't be scared. None of this is going to cost you a fortune. Maybe £200, £300, £400 for a printer. A filament will cost you between sort of £15 and £25 for about a kilo, which will make, I don't know, probably 10 or more of these large guitar holders. This is going to be a fun experience, so enjoy the experience. That's the key takeaway from all of this. It's engineering, it's good fun. It's certainly helped me with a lot of my projects, including this coffee table arcade machine, which has a 3D printed double USB port on the front of it, so you can plug your joysticks in. So I hope this has been a little bit useful. Take care, stay safe, and we'll see you again. Bye for now.
If you enjoy my content and would like to support The Cave while receiving a completely ad-free experience and access to releases 1 week before they go public, then visit patreon.com/retromancave and join the official Cave Dwellers. Thank you for your support.